It happened at the company holiday party, the kind of night where everything looked polished but felt hollow. She was in her element, laughing too loudly at the wrong man's jokes. His name was Travis, a sales rep with a perfect smile and zero depth. Everyone in the room could see the tension between them, but only I knew it wasn't attraction. It was control. When she leaned closer to him, brushing his sleeve just enough to make sure I noticed, I didn't react. That was new. Usually, I'd shift in my seat, clench my jaw, give her exactly what she wanted, proof that she still mattered enough to make me flinch. But that night, I went silent. Just like that, the game changed. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy performing, feeding off the crowd. Our coworkers watched from across the bar, pretending not to. Even the bartender at IHOP later that night probably heard about it. Evelyn and her husband, they'd say, something's off between them. When she came home, she asked if I was upset. I told her no, just tired. And maybe I was. Tired of being the quiet constant while she treated attention like currency. The next morning, I drove my Subaru Outback through the fog, the heater barely keeping up with the cold. For the first time, I didn't think about what she'd post on Instagram or who she'd charm next. I just thought about silence, clean, measured silence. That's when I decided I wouldn't confront her. I wouldn't accuse or explain. I'd do what I did best, manage systems, not chaos. I'd start by removing myself from hers, and she'd never see it coming. A few days later, the first crack appeared, not between us, but inside her rhythm. She came home late from another client dinner, her voice bright, but eyes searching. She expected the usual, a question, a hint of jealousy, a sign that her little performances still had an audience. Instead, I was on the couch, laptop open, finishing logistics reports. I didn't even look up. She lingered near the door, waiting. Rough night, I asked without tone, like I was asking about the weather. That silence afterward was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. At work, things moved forward. I adjusted schedules, transferred a few responsibilities, and told HR I might be spending more time on-site at our northern facility. No drama, just structure. That's what I understood, how to redirect a system without announcing it. Meanwhile, her energy shifted. She started messaging her team on Slack late into the night, sending little notes about event concepts, color palettes, catering quotes. Anything to fill the air that used to be filled with us. I watched the glow from her phone light up the room, but I didn't ask. I let the distance grow like a controlled burn. On Saturday, I left early for a run to Sam's Club. I walked through the aisles quietly, picking things we actually needed, nothing more. For years, she'd call halfway through, reminding me to grab something for the house. That morning, my phone stayed silent. It struck me then, how easy it was to live without her voice directing everything. No accusations, no performance, just the steady hum of a life taking its shape back. She wanted reaction. What she got was removal. It was a Wednesday when I noticed her routine breaking. She'd started dressing sharper for work, not for herself, but for the audience she built around that man, Travis. Her laughter returned to the kind that demanded attention, every gesture calculated. Yet beneath all of it, there was something new, restlessness. The power she fed on wasn't landing the same way. I wasn't watching anymore. At the office, I spent lunch in my car, scrolling LinkedIn. Quietly, I updated my profile, launching a new logistics division for internal optimization. It wasn't a lie. It was a shift, one that didn't include her. The post went live, professional and neutral, but I knew she'd see it eventually. She followed everything I did online, even if she pretended not to. That night, she mentioned Travis again, casually, like she wanted to test my reaction. She said he'd offered to help sponsor one of her events. Normally, I'd ask why she needed him for that. Instead, I nodded and went back to my notes. Her smile faltered just a bit, small enough to miss, unless you were looking for it. She poured herself a drink and paced the kitchen. The silence between us wasn't angry, it was absolute. Every sound, the glass on the counter, the soft hum of the refrigerator, felt like background noise in a room where something had already ended. I went to bed early. She stayed up, phone in hand, sending messages I didn't read. Somewhere around midnight, I heard her sigh. Not out of guilt, but confusion. She couldn't tell when she lost control, only that she had. And I didn't feel the need to help her find it again. By the next week, I'd stopped waiting for her schedule to match mine. I left for work before sunrise, came home after dark, and when she asked about dinner, I told her I'd already eaten. Every step I took was measured, not dramatic. I was still present, just unreachable. That was the difference. At first, she tried to ignore it. Then she started performing harder. More smiles, more stories about funny things Travis said. She wanted to spark something in me, but the silence had turned into armor. Her control relied on my reaction, and I'd taken that away. On Friday, she hosted another networking mixer downtown. Normally, I'd go, stand in the corner, watch her orbit the room. That night, I didn't even pretend. I stayed at the office until everyone else had left, cleared out my personal items, and packed a small box into the car. It wasn't a breakup. It was a quiet migration. By the time she texted, "You're not coming?" I was already checking into a short-term rental closer to the warehouse. The place was simple: a kitchen, a couch, a single lamp. No noise, no tension. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. She called twice. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to IHOP the next morning, sat by the window, and ordered pancakes with black coffee. No performance. No eyes on me. Just stillness. When I drove back, her messages stacked up. Questions, jokes, even a few photos, all designed to trigger a reply. But the truth was simple. I wasn't angry. I was done participating. That night, she looked at her phone like it had betrayed her. For once, the silence was louder than her voice. The next few days felt like a clean sheet of paper. I woke up early, made coffee, and drove straight to the site without checking my phone. There was something freeing about knowing she'd wake up to an empty house, not abandoned, just quiet. Predictability had always been my weapon, and now it worked in reverse. She couldn't predict me anymore. At work, things accelerated. I finalized the internal restructuring plan and quietly moved a few key contracts away from the intermediary her department often used, the one Travis worked with. On paper, it looked like an efficiency adjustment. In reality, it was the removal of a distraction. No confrontation, no trace. Just cause and effect. That evening, I posted a short note on LinkedIn. Excited to lead our new operational streamlining project, focused on integrity and long-term performance. Within an hour, the post gathered likes and comments, including one from her company's main client. I knew she'd see it. She always noticed when the attention shifted somewhere she couldn't control. When I got home, she was already there, sitting on the couch with a drink. The energy was different, tight, uncertain. She mentioned that Travis had been overstepping boundaries, pretending it annoyed her. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I just nodded. Her next words stumbled out. "You've been distant." I kept my eyes on my keys. "You've been loud," I said quietly. That ended the conversation. She went upstairs, frustrated by how little resistance I offered. But that was the point. I'd stopped being a wall to push against. She just hadn't realized yet that her power depended on my reaction, and I wasn't giving it back. The next week, the silence became public. Her charm stopped landing the way it used to. People at her events started noticing the cracks, the forced smiles, the nervous glances toward empty corners where I used to stand. Control loses its meaning when no one's watching you perform. I heard from a mutual friend that Travis had been temporarily reassigned after a few internal complaints. Nothing official, just whispers. I didn't need to ask who started them. People like him always left trails. I just made sure the right eyes found them. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't even care. It was just the system correcting itself. That weekend, she attended a colleague's birthday alone. Normally, she'd flood social media with photos, angles, laughter. This time, there was nothing, just one blurry story posted late at night, captioned, "Off night." Meanwhile, I kept my routine simple. I'd stop by Sam's Club early Saturday mornings, stock up on basics, drive back to the apartment, and cook breakfast in silence. Sometimes I'd check her profile, not out of longing, but observation. The glow she lived on was dimming, and everyone around her could see it. By Monday, one of her coworkers reached out to me by mistake, an old group thread still active. He wrote, "Hope things are okay between you two." I didn't reply. That's when I realized the shift was complete. The sympathy had switched sides. She'd built her image on control and confidence. Now, she was the one people whispered about, the one they pitted quietly in hallways. And I hadn't said a single word. Power doesn't disappear. It just changes hands. By the time she realized I wasn't coming back home every night, she started visiting my office unannounced. The receptionist would buzz me and whisper, "She's here again." I'd step out just long enough to be polite, never long enough to give her an opening. Her tone shifted, less confident, more searching. "We should talk," she said once. I just nodded and told her I had a meeting in 5. That was true, but even if it hadn't been, I would have said it anyway. The next morning, she texted a picture of our house, her coffee on the porch, sunlight on the railing, with a line that said, "It's too quiet without you." I looked at it for a second before locking my phone. She didn't realize that quiet was the point. At night, I started running again. No playlists, no calls, just the rhythm of my shoes hitting pavement, cutting through the noise that used to define my days. When I stopped by IHOP after one run, the waitress asked if my wife was joining. I just smiled and said, "Not tonight." It was the most peaceful answer I'd given anyone in months. Meanwhile, her messages on Slack to her team got shorter, colder. She was burning out, but she wouldn't admit it. Control had turned into exhaustion. The more she tried to restore what we had, the more she exposed how much of it depended on me reacting. Back at my apartment, I'd sometimes catch myself standing by the window, wondering if she'd show up. Not because I wanted her to, but because I knew she needed to. And when she finally did, I'd be ready. Not to argue, not to explain, just to stay still and let her see what silence really looked like. She showed up one Thursday evening, right after I'd finished a late call. No warning, just the sound of her car outside and the quick rhythm of heels on concrete. When I opened the door, she looked different, not polished, not composed, just tired. She stood there for a moment, waiting for an invitation that never came. Inside, the apartment felt smaller with her in it. She looked around like she didn't recognize the space, the single lamp, the untouched dishes, the half-read report on the table. "You really live like this now?" she asked, trying to sound amused, but her voice cracked halfway through. I didn't answer. She talked for a while, about how stressful work had been, how people were treating her differently, how she felt misunderstood. I listened, but only in the way you listen to a distant sound. Every word she said was an echo of the old game. Provoke, test, control. But the difference now was that I didn't need to respond. After a few minutes, she stopped. The silence between us stretched, and she finally said, "You used to fight for me." I looked at her, steady. "You used to make that mean something." Her eyes flickered, confusion, regret, pride, all tangled together. She wanted me to break, to reach out, to show a trace of the man she could still move. But I'd left that man behind weeks ago. She stood by the door, waiting for anything, a word, a glance, even anger. But I just nodded once, opened the door, and let her walk out. For the first time, she realized it wasn't distance. It was disconnection. And that's something you can't fix by coming back. After that night, she disappeared for a while. No texts, no calls. I figured she needed space to rebuild the illusion of control, the one she used to hide behind. But silence has a strange way of amplifying truth. It doesn't just separate people, it exposes them. A few weeks later, I ran into one of her coworkers at a client conference. He mentioned her name carefully, like testing my reaction. I stayed neutral, but he kept talking. "She's not herself lately. Keeps making small mistakes, losing focus." I just nodded. I didn't need the details. I already knew what he was describing, the collapse that happens when attention stops being a currency. Later that night, I saw her post on LinkedIn. It was one of those motivational quotes about resilience and finding balance. A few likes, no comments. The kind of thing people post when they're trying to convince themselves, not others. Meanwhile, I've been spending mornings at IHOP, same table by the window, same quiet routine. It was ordinary, but it was mine. That stability, that rhythm, was something she could never understand. Her world had always needed eyes on it to exist. Then came the message. Just one line. "Can we talk? Not about us. Just talk." I didn't reply right away. I sat with it for a while, letting it settle. When I finally called, her voice sounded smaller. She said, "I didn't think you'd actually stop caring." I told her I hadn't stopped. I'd just stopped performing. There was a pause. I could almost hear her realizing that I meant every word. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the silence. She was inside it. We met at a small cafe near her office. No stage, no crowd, no spotlight to hide behind. She looked nervous, almost fragile, holding her cup like it could anchor her. I noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, and how her voice softened when she said my name, as if she wasn't sure she still had the right to use it. She started talking, words spilling out faster than they used to. She said she'd made mistakes, that she missed the steadiness I brought, that she didn't mean for any of it to go so far. I listened, silent, letting the weight of her own voice fill the space she used to dominate. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. "I was just flirting," she said quietly. "I thought you understood." I took a slow breath and looked at her, not angry, not bitter, just clear. "I did," I said. "That's why I stopped playing." Her lips parted like she wanted to respond, but there was nothing left to say. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was final, not cruel, just complete. Outside, the air was cold, the kind that wakes you up all the way. I walked her to her car, and for a second, she looked like she wanted to reach for me, to reset everything. But I just stepped back. When she drove away, I stood there for a moment, watching the taillights fade. Then I got into my car, started the engine, and let the quiet fill the space where noise used to live. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.